starting from the Constitution of India, and then we will be covering various other aspects of Indian polity like parliamentary system of government, like panchayat and municipalities, like various schedules, fundamental rights, directive principles, etc., which will be useful for you for class 9th and for RIMC examination also. So this series is going to help you a lot. Follow this series, like our channel, subscribe and press the bell icon so that you do not miss any update. Continuing forward with the first chapter, which is Constitution of India. Constitution in basic terms is a set of document which defines what type of a government a country will have, which defines what type of rights the country will get, which defines the responsibilities of citizens of its country. The constitution of a country basically gives a limit to the powers of a country's government so that the people can enjoy the rights and their privileges. The constitution also guides the country's government to run the administration of a country so that the country is administered according to the rule of law. Now there are functions of constitution which I have mentioned. Constitution is a document or set of rules and regulations Constitution is a document and a set of rules and regulation. And what is the function of constitution? Meaning, what is the function of these rules and regulation? First, these rules and regulations mentioned in the constitution determine what type of polity a country will have. For example, in India, we follow the parliamentary system of government. The parliamentary system of government, also called as the prime ministerial form of government, largely, though there is a little bit difference, we will see that difference after some classes. Indian constitution mentions about parliamentary form of government, in part union executive, largely in part of union, part 5 of constitution. So it mentions about the form of government. Apart from mentioning the form of government, the Constitution of India also mentions about the rights and privileges of its citizens as well as non-citizens. There are various rights which are given to us by the Constitution of India. These rights are called as fundamental rights as well as constitutional rights. Fundamental rights are those rights which are mentioned in part 3 of the Constitution, and other rights which are mentioned in the constitution apart from part 3 are called as constitutional rights. I will be giving examples and I will be explaining what is fundamental right in later chapters. You have to now know only this much only. So the constitution also gives rights and privileges. Rights and privileges to citizen as well as non-citizens also. There are certain rights which are also given to non-citizens. We will be discussing about them also. Non-citizens include the foreigners which are coming to your country. They are also refugees, etc. The third feature of constitution, a very important feature, is the constitution limits the power of a government. If a country has a constitution, it necessarily implies that the powers of the government is limited by that constitution. The government, or largely the executive, cannot do anything on its own. It cannot become a dictatorship. This is ensured by having a written constitution in a country. So the third feature of a constitution, or the third function of the constitution, is it limits the power of government. Apart from these functions, these three functions, there are also various other functions which we will be discussing. For example, Indian Constitution, apart from these functions, also mentions about various other functions, such as there are also directive principles of state policy mentioned in part 4 of the Constitution. Directive principles are some instructions or directives which are given to the executive or the government. These are the principles that have to be followed by government while making rules, while making laws, while executing any action. These things are to be kept in mind by government, and these directive principles ensure that an individual live a life of dignity, the all-round development of an individual takes place, the social development, the economic development, the political development of the country takes place. That's why these directive principles are mentioned in part 4 in our constitution. So the constitution is also a directive document that directs the government or the executive to do certain things or not do certain things. It is also a directive document. The next feature of constitution, and largely particularly Indian constitution, is that it mentions the fundamental duties of citizen. The constitution also mentions what the citizen must do, what are their roles and responsibilities as the citizen of India. For example, the constitution defines one of the fundamental duty that we have to protect our national heritage. We have to protect the national heritage of our composite culture. We have to protect our environment. We have to give the chances of education for everyone till the age of 14 years. These are all the directive principles mentioned in part 4A of the constitution, that is article 51A. So the constitution also defines the fundamental duties. You have to notice the fact that the constitution is defining the duties of both the state, that is the executive, and the citizens, the normal people. The duties of state are mentioned in directive principles, which I have already written, and the duties of citizen are mentioned in the segment of fundamental duties, that is part 4A. We will be discussing these in detail after some time. I am just giving a basic review of what are the functions of constitution. The next most important function of constitution all over the world is the constitution establishes the institutions of governance. What are the institutions of governance? These are some important posts, positions and other organizations as well as institutions which are necessary for the administration of country. For example, the post of president, the position of prime minister, the council of minister. These are constitutional positions which are very much important for the proper functioning and administration of the countries. There are also various other institutions. For example, National Commission for Scheduled Tribe, National Commission for Backward Classes, National Commission for Scheduled Caste. These are also institutions which help in proper governance of a country, though indirectly. There are also various other institutions like the position of chief minister, which are mentioned in the constitution. So the other function of constitution is The constitution establishes the institutions of governance. The next feature of constitution is that the constitution also establishes the type of polity that is to be followed in the country. There are various types of polity. For example, type of polity in a country. There are various examples of a polity. A country can be a federal country, a country can be a unitary country. A unitary country is one such type of polity, political system, where all the power is centralized in a one entity. There is only one type of government and no other governments. There are many countries in the world that follow this type of system. The most important example is United Kingdom. United Kingdom is a unitary polity. The other type of a polity is a federal country, federal polity. The meaning of the word federal is devolution of power. It means that the power has been devolved from central government to various local provinces or local governments by the constitution. The Constitution of India also ensures the sanctity and protect the sanctity of these state governments. So India is a federal country. There are various examples of polity: federal, unitary, and there is also third type, quasi-federal polity. The meaning of the word quasi-federal is that though the country is a federal country, but there is a strong centralizing tendency in that polity of that country. Meaning the central government has more powers as compared to the local state governments. In India, we follow this quasi-federal type of system which is defined in our constitution. Though India is a union of state, Article 1 of the constitution mentions India as union of state, which means that the state also have a constitutional protection, while the central government also has its powers and responsibilities. They work under the same constitution. Their rules and regulations have been delineated. There is a schedule called Schedule 7 of the Constitution. This schedule defines or demarcates the limits of each of the type of government. For example, there is a union list, there is a state list, and there is a concurrent list. These are respectively called as list 1, list 2 and list 3 in Schedule 7 of our constitution. So Schedule 7 is an example of the federal type of polity in our constitution. So this is the basic functioning of a constitution. This is the constitution. Let's revise it. The constitution, the functions of constitution are: it defines the form of government in a country, whether it is a prime ministerial form of government or presidential form of government, like what we see in United States of America. In United Kingdom and India, we have the prime ministerial form of government. The constitution also gives the rights and privileges to citizens of the country. Some rights are fundamental in nature, which cannot be violated by any entity living in India, like state or any other citizen. These rights are called as fundamental rights, which are mentioned in Part 3 of the Constitution. Some rights are not in fundamental rights. For example, right to property, mentioned in Article 300A. These are called as constitutional rights, which are not mentioned in fundamental part of the constitution, that is part 3, but otherwise in other areas of the constitution. The third is the constitution limits the power of government. The government cannot do everything and anything abruptly. The government or the Prime Minister of India cannot become a dictator on its own, cannot become a monarch. What is the thing that is preventing him from doing so? That is the Constitution of India. The Constitution limits the power of the government. The next is, it is a directive document. The Constitution directs some instructions to the state in the form of directive principles of state policy. The next is fundamental duties. The Constitution also gives certain duties and responsibilities to the citizens of India. The Constitution also establishes the institutions of governance in a country, like the position of Prime Minister, the position of Comptroller and Auditor General of India, the Attorney General of India, the position of President, Governors, etc. These all positions which effectively run the country and administer our country are mentioned in the Constitution of India. The Constitution also describes the type of polity. So this was a recap little. I believe we have completed the first minor topic of the larger topic, that is the Constitution of India. This is a very important chapter. From it the questions are asked in all types of examinations. So today that's all. Tomorrow we will be coming with further topics, particularly fundamental rights and other topics also.